Can you beat Five Nights at Freddy's Ruin if the Mimic chases you the entire game? Yes, you heard me right. This large metal Chad will be pursuing me at all times in both the virtual world and the real one. And if that sounds absolutely terrifying and grueling, well, that's because it is. This is the FNAF Ruin Mimic Challenge, and dear Lord help me, enjoy. So let's start this race to the finish with our dear old pal, quote-unquote, Gregory. I think that's what he said his name was. Before getting started, there's a couple things to note about this challenge. First off, you're going to notice that the Mimic isn't going to be traditionally chasing us. It's not always going to be walking at us as it pursues. The way the Mimic loads in is sort of chaotic and unpredictable. Every 3 to 5 seconds, it can teleport based on the player's location. Almost as if it were programmed by Goku and acquired instant transmission. Throughout the challenge, you'll see this works to both my advantage and disadvantage. The Mimic is going to be capable of blocking our path of progression, and if we get lucky, it'll hopefully spawn behind a wall where it belongs. It's pretty intense, as it keeps you on your toes even more so than usual, because it can literally just spawn right in front of you. But let's get started because Chapter 1's intro is entirely too easy and misleading. After the intro cutscene of Cassie entering the building, I'm immediately greeted by the Mimic, as it appears and instantly falls through the ground. A few moments later, it re-emerges right where I need to climb down. Oof. We're going to find a majority of this intro to be a freebie, due to the lack of a nav mesh in this area. The game never planned for animatronics to walk here, so it's missing one. A navigational mesh represents a defined area an NPC can walk on. So there's no nav mesh, as the intro only has scripted events. Therefore, the Mimic suffers with only being able to teleport around and stand idle. That doesn't go without saying that the Mimic is still terrifying, as it stalks us through this section of the game. Hearing its constant stomping and screen shaking means the Mimic is close, a detail that is going to be useful and annoying later on. But once Monty spears us into the water, the challenge truly begins, because now the Mimic can walk. I make my way through the rubble as I feel it closing in. The navigational mesh is intact in this area, and it's now time to panic. Luckily, it can't fit through this rubble we must traverse. I'm so busy on where the Mimic could be, this dang mask spot gives me a jump scare. I swear, every time, man. Watch as I helplessly die. I get the mask, but find myself being blockaded by the Mimic. My attempts at progress were met with a grueling death. However, I learned if I backtrack a little and get the Mimic to teleport behind me, I would be able to rush ahead and progress. The Mimic is suspiciously quiet, and then just spawns to my left, causing me to jump. I hide in the stall, only for it to say psych and vanish before me. And this is when I realize this is basically how the game is gonna go. An anxiety-inducing, never too certain nightmare. I managed to avoid the Mimic until getting to this electrified door. It nearly gets me, but I managed to dodge it, with the Mimic disappearing shortly after. I'm nervous the Mimic is going to spawn right in front of my face, because honestly, anything is possible. I make it to the security node, which thankfully is blocking the Mimic from getting to me. This results with me being able to take down this security network fairly easily. However, the Mimic is once again blocking the way I need to go. So I repeat what I did before and backtrack to get the Mimic to spawn behind me, so I can rush and assure it won't spawn in front of me. In a sense, this resembles Sarah Connor being pursued by the T-800 in Terminator. Luckily, in our case, the Mimic isn't armed to the teeth. Anyways, I get to the next security node, breach the first child node, but struggle with the second. The Mimic is defending this area a little too well, getting assistance from the entity to only make things worse. After playing Ring Around the Rosie for a few, I managed to deactivate this node. The Mimic nearly gets me, but then suspiciously vanishes. Following this, our friend luckily gets stuck in a box, but this doesn't stop it from walking in place, disrupting me as I connect the holograms. The shaking is not too bad, but it forces me to take my time while connecting them. However, the following security node was a gimme, as the Mimic was still struggling with getting in this room. Once again, its persistent stomping makes the hologram connecting irritating, because it actually moves the screen, but the job gets done. Making my way out, I'm so focused on where the Mimic could be, I forgot about this interaction with Monty, who successfully jump scares me. The Mimic of course stalks me as I make my way back to the door we opened. I gotta say, this Mimic is persistent. At the next security node, as I'm deactivating it, the Mimic nearly destroys me, but just stops. I believe it's because of where I was standing. So, thinking I'm safe, I stand still, in hopes it'll go away, only to find myself being fooled as the Mimic proceeds to wreck my world. This part was aggravating because the Mimic had this node on lockdown. You'll notice sometimes when the Mimic strikes, it walks through the player, followed with a slight delay, and then a static screen. Yeah, all the kinks aren't worked out quite yet with this one. I end up having another close call here, narrowly escaping the Mimic. I created some distance, and then made my way back to the security node. I could feel the mimic closing in, with it seemingly being right behind me. I struggle at this point because I'm merely just trying to stay hidden. I figured I had found a safe spot, with the mimic nowhere to be seen. With this stroke of luck, I have enough time to breach the security node and carry on. The mimic is still gone, but then, yes, there it is. And oh, here it comes. Did I mention the unpredictable teleporting? Anyways, we have another security node, and I'm not gonna lie, it felt like the mimic was toying with me. It would start approaching from this location, and as soon as I'd flee, it would spawn right in the path I was heading, making me feel trapped. So I timed it just right as it teleports and deactivate the first node. Knowing I tricked it, the mimic peers through my soul. Thinking I'm slick, I make my way up these stairs, proceed to put my mask on, and boom. The mimic must have spawned right in front of my face as I put the mask on. Talk about timing! Getting back to that point, I manage to get back on track as I cautiously deactivate the second node. I get over to the security network and in a shaking manner, breach the security node. I manage to avoid the mimic as I access this security cam to progress. I catch a glimpse of the mimic teleporting in the camera for just a brief moment. I ignore it though, detect the anomaly, and press on. I can hear it chasing me, but realize it's struggling to find a path to me. The section I'm heading into seems like it's going to work in my favor. The reason being is a lot of this section is closed in, and the mimic's size is going to be its weakness. This section involves the creepy moon animatronic that calls us naughty a lot. Through this first part, I can see the mimic struggle, as it's helplessly getting stuck in random objects in the distance. So I go down this slide carefree, with no thought that the mimic could be waiting at the bottom. Sure enough, it was, and I paid the toll with my life. My next go, I managed to have a safe ride down the slide, then find myself being blockaded. I don't know if I got stuck in something, but the mimic easily kills me a few moments later. So this time I wait for it to teleport and make a run for it, immediately entering a moon cutscene. I was surprised that the mimic didn't kill me during the cutscene. I'm pretty sure it's possible, but fortunately, it never happened in this case. But if it did, and it was unavoidable, I have a failsafe specifically for cutscenes that become impossible to make it through. Anyways, I believe I'm safe in here for the moment, hard to say, so I just continued with the anomaly detection and moved forward into this playpen. It wasn't until I got to the top where the mimic became a threat again. It didn't last though, as it was struggling to get me once again. So I get the first generator on for our moon friend, proceed to get chased by the mimic some more, and make it to the camera station. I go for the anomalies with no hesitation, thinking I'm probably going to just die. Turns out I had plenty of time though, but I do have a close encounter with the entity as I pushed on. The remainder of the section works in my favor, allowing me to safely get to the second generator. Same thing on our way to the moon. The mimic's size continues to work in my favor. I get up to the moon relatively quick, make sure the coast is clear, and start the cutscene. During this, I can hear the mimic in the distance, and I was fully prepared for the mimic to be waiting for me, as the moon flew me down to safety. It never happened though. Thanking my lucky stars, I push on to the next section. This area has a security node that has 3 child nodes that we need to deactivate. It also includes some endoskeletons that come to life as we do the deactivations. While getting the first node, the mimic tried trapping me within this room. I did manage to get out, but found myself rushing with this security node in general. Quickly, I get the second one, but ultimately, this leads me to getting snatched up by one of the endoskeletons. My second try, I managed to get further and eventually get to the last node. So I deactivate it, patiently wait, please don't hurt me, and attempt to breach the security node. Luckily, the mimic must have got caught on something, but for the life of me, this shaking seems like it's getting worse as I progress through the game. I continue to struggle with the security network, but eventually get it. In the theater section, I try to figure out exactly how the mimic was going to behave. Lucky for me, in this area the mimic gets stuck in the floor often, so I timed it just right as I detected the anomalies and quickly made my way down this endoskeleton's throat. Yep, that still sounds weird saying it out loud. Anyways, most players will know that this follows with Cassie falling out of the air ducts and into Monty's Gator Golf ride. During this part, the player is not able to exit the ride, leaving us helpless in a sense. I say this because I know the mimic is lurking, and it has a chance of showing up at any moment. Of course, a few moments later, I hear the sound that the mimic makes when it kills you, but it was nowhere in sight. I thought I was safe? However, my screen just goes to static, confirming I'm toast. Even after going back and looking at this death, I was still unable to see exactly how the mimic got me, but I digress. This only happened one time, as I was able to reach the catwalks on my second attempt. The entirety of this section with the catwalks is unfortunately pretty broken for the mimic. It does not have a lot of ground to work with in regards to spawning in. So, we're left with the mimic getting stuck in this endless loop of falling. This happens throughout the entire section, so my gameplay throughout the catwalks doesn't vary much from normal. However, this only happened once, but the Mimic did manage to randomly get me, as it clipped us through the catwalk in the process. The Mimic's ground-pounding effects made shooting these Monty signs a little more difficult to shoot due to the shaking. Luckily, my aim was on point though, and I cleared this section fairly easily, making my way to the main security node, and oh! I don't think I need to explain what's happening here, but clearly I'm struggling with the shaking. It took a little under 2 minutes, but I eventually breached it. Jeez! I escape these catwalks and make my way to the next area. Luckily, this time I don't get scooped by the Mimic while on the Monty cart. As soon as I get off it though, the Mimic pursues me and forces me to fall back. Knowing I'm about to be cornered, I figured it had me, but apparently the Mimic reached its limit, as it sank into the ground. The Mimic teleported and continued to attempt to block me, but I managed to slip by this time. In the room right before Chapter 4, I found myself not having enough time to charge the conduits, resulting in my fatality. After a few tries, I succeeded. I don't know if it's because the Mimic teleported to the second level in this room, but I'll take it. The Mimic continues to struggle with teleporting on the correct floor, and despite its efforts, it allows me to get through this room quicker than expected. So we get Chica moving and press on. This next section involves avoiding Chica. So I get to the security camera station and start to divert her, as we're supposed to, but I feel the Mimic is close, so I panic and run for it. This led me to a futile situation where I tried to slip by Chica, but instead, she destroys me. The progression I made gives me a break though, allowing me to carry on right from where I died. However, as always, the Mimic is hot on my trail, so I gotta keep moving. The next room has these looping paths, which honestly became a bit of a headache, because the Mimic kept respawning on one of the paths over and over again. At one point, the Mimic chases me into the bathroom, but I'm able to hide in a stall where it can't get me. Staying on my toes, I'm able to obtain the nodes. I then, with much frustration, connect the holograms and... oh, I'm in trouble. Can we talk about this, please? My next go at this was a success, but Chica and the Mimic were closing in. Take a listen. Anyway, the Mimic continues to pursue me into the East server room, and in here, I have no issue as I can easily outrun it. Of course, the Mimic still struggles to spawn on certain pathways along the way. However, this T-800 pulls a fast one and teleports right behind me, with a delayed but swift kill. I end up making it back to the camera station and start working on the anomalies. Thankfully, it's a safe spot from the Mimic too, giving us a break. The next room is basically the same, with me having no issues solving the anomalies and escaping the deadly static. In these halls, the Mimic tries to spawn behind me, but it gives me an open path to just run forward. So I press on. This follows with a cutscene of Roxy having a hard time. This part is more intense because not only is Roxy nearly about to kill us, but the Mimic is also walking about. Thankfully, I was too busy exploring the back of this room the whole time, allowing me to eventually flee. This section has 4 nodes we need to deactivate, and having a jolly old Mimic pursuing you, of course, doesn't help. I get the first one quick, with the Mimic breathing down my neck, and with the entity jumping in the fun too. I do fortunately manage to get around the Mimic and get my mask off. However, the Mimic gives me a mini panic attack and forces me back the way I came. I get back on track though, and get to the next node, but it's still right on my tail, and now I have a problem. Oh, wait, is this another trick? Or, oh, okay, just menacingly stare at me while I deactivate this node. Cool. Doing this locks my mask, and it just happens to be right as the entity spawns in. So, as you can see, I'm in a pickle here, but I eventually see an opening and take it. Unfortunately, things take a turn for the worse though. I deactivate the node, and then get backed up into the wrong direction by the Mimic. As soon as I lose the Mimic, the entity shows up again. I do manage to dodge this digital nightmare, but the Mimic is right behind waiting, and I never stood a chance. Luckily, I load back up right where I left off, but this time I immediately book it once deactivating the node. After solving the anomalies, I continued to just rush forward to keep ahead of the Mimic. It seemed to be working out. I got the last node and then proceeded forward, only to get wrecked by Chica though. I couldn't hear her over the Mimic stomping. Eventually, I get back to this part, but something strange happens. The Mimic ends up getting me as I'm on this panel, but I don't die? We just slide through the level, eventually falling out of the map and into the void. I went off camera to get a better look, and as you can see, the Mimic is holding Cassie's arms as they fall for eternity. This, in turn, soft-locks me, and I had to quit out of the game. So this jump scare ended up being a fate worse than death. Glorious! However, after getting back on track, this security node was fairly easy. I breached the security node and move on to the next section. Heading down into the next endeavor leads us to, you guessed it, Monty. Along with the Mimic, who nearly gets me before I can even move. It's evident that this part is going to be tricky to get through, so I just go for it. It looks like the Mimic can't teleport in once I get to this door. So I get to work with the Faz wrench, get into the next room, wait for Monty to swim by, and once again book it for the next door. I think the Mimic is being kind here and gave me a break, as it's nowhere to be found. I just keep moving to avoid any interaction with the Mimic as I proceed to the next section. It seems to be working, as the Mimic struggles to keep up. I reach the security camera station and direct Roxy as the player normally would, with no sight of the Mimic. Or so I thought. I tried sliding by the Mimic at one point, only to be gotten by Roxy. Although the Mimic made it difficult, I was able to get through this part on my next go. The Mimic keeps playing mind games, as I'm having difficulty knowing where it'll teleport next. I thought it got me while running for the door, but it was just Roxy demanding her eyes back. Sorry Roxy, I don't have your eyes. This leads us into the section with the mini wind-up music men, which personally creep me out. The Mimic is waiting for me to make a move as I go past it. Pulling a fast one, it takes advantage of me as I put my mask on and off, blindsiding me as a result. I didn't even make it to the camera station. Oof. Doesn't matter though, seeing as the checkpoint works in my favor, spawning me around where I died. Other than having to dance around the camera stations at times, this entire section doesn't vary much from normal gameplay. Once again, I just have to be quick with every action I make. I had another case where the Mimic grabs me as I'm using the Faz wrench. Only this time it drags out longer than last time. And surprisingly, I ended up breaking out of its grasp. Well, sorta. I'm able to look around at least, but it still has a hold of me. It's quite terrifying. Like, where is it taking me? Luckily, it eventually kills me instead of soft-locking me, so I don't have to quit out of the game this time. However, using similar techniques from previous sections, I'm able to grab all the nodes and clear this section. I'm basically safe leading up to the next area, as the Mimic can't really follow me in this area. This is where I discover a glitch in the Matrix, because yes, somehow there are now two Mimics. I'm not entirely sure how this happened, but I'm just gonna roll with it. That being said, it couldn't have happened at a worse time. There's two nodes I need to get before proceeding, and, well, I stood no chance. I got one, but while getting the second node, I got terminated. Thankfully, the second Mimic was gone after this death, which made this security node a little easier, but it was still challenging. It's now time to ask our old friend Freddy for some help though. Just kidding. I'm able to navigate this murderous chase with Freddy with not much issue. The Mimic has gone MIA, so I just keep pressing on as quickly as I can. There's a lot of traversing through vents in this part, so I don't really have to worry about the Gregory imposter being close by. I make it to Roxy, and sadly have no time for this emotional dialogue, so I get right to the point. And boink! Sorry! This Mimic's right on my tail, Roxy, so no time for words. Going deep down below, the Mimic is nowhere to be found, so I, of course, with haste, press on. Cautiously, mind you. However, the Mimic shows up doing what it does best, gatekeeping me, so I backtrack and try again. I end up making a mistake by trying to slip by the Mimic. Not so clever on my part. No matter, I managed to get by it, and as you can see, we're so close to the end. During one of my attempts, the Mimic stabs me in the back as I'm dealing with the entity, but I do end up clearing this room, leading us to the final chase scene. Here, Cassie makes the realization that Gregory is not Gregory, but luckily, Roxy is here to save the day. I'm also fortunate the other Mimic didn't show up and murder me during this cutscene. The chase, didn't last long, as the other Mimic teleports right in front of me. I tried to slip by it, but it wasn't happening. Rest in peace. So now that I know the Mimic can spawn in that first left tunnel, I take the right one this time. It works out perfectly, as I'm able to make it to the end with no Mimic interactions. However, as I'm approaching the panel, I can see the Mimic inside the door. I prayed to the FNAF gods that it would teleport away by the time I opened this door. And sure enough, my prayers were answered. Thanks, Dawko. But there you have it! This was quite the endeavor, and it was great to see that the game is beatable while being chased by this Mimic. But I hope you enjoyed this bizarre challenge, and if you did, consider subscribing for more videos just like this one. Thanks for watching, and cheers!